Well, good morning and welcome to today's episode of Transformed. Today I want to talk to you about progressive possession.
Welcome to today's message with Pastor Jim Balzano.
And I want to take a moment to thank Park Home for our studio furniture. You know, I was thinking earlier this year, I was reading a passage of scripture in Exodus 23. Now, let me set it up a little bit. As you know, God had promised to give the land of Canaan to the people of God. Now, that promise was delayed for centuries as the sons of Israel lived in Egypt, both as free people for a season and then an elongated season of captive people. But God, through Moses, liberated them from the oppression of Pharaoh and took them through the Red Sea and gave them freedom. In Exodus 23, he gave them various laws concerning how they would live in the land of Canaan. In verse 20, God tells them that he would send an angel to lead them. Therefore, they were to pay attention to him as well as obey his voice, and they would take possession of the land. Yet, it's interesting, total possession would not be instantaneous. It would be progressive. In spite of all of that, it would ultimately be a new season for them if they would indeed listen to the angel who would lead them. Now, listen to what God says to them. He says, "And I will send hornets ahead of you so that they will drive out the Hivites, the Canaanites, and the Hittites from you. I will not drive them out from you in a single year, so that the land will not become desolate and the animals of the field become too numerous for you. I will drive them out from you little by little until you become fruitful and take possession of the land." It's an amazing portion of Scripture. Here's a couple of thoughts that I want to share with you, maybe to bless you and to encourage you and even challenge you as you look ahead to things in your own life. First of all, let's remember this. A promise made is a promise kept. God always keeps his promise. God promised this land clear back to Father Abraham. And that promise went through Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and continued even for a captive people, that one day God was going to take them into that promised land because he is the promise maker, but he also is the promise keeper. So let me say to you, when God gives you a promise, even though it might be delayed, God will bring it to pass because he's a promise keeper. Now, what's interesting is once God took them in, he said to them that I'm going to give it to you, but not all at once. You see, it's amazing to me. He said, because if I give it to you all at once, he said to them what? He said, the animals will be too numerous for you. Wow. You see, delayed possession is sometimes because of divine protection. The delay was for their benefit. The delay was not because of the enemy. It was because of God. God built the delay in the process. Man, sometimes we think delay is always the enemy, when the fact of the matter is sometimes delay is the hand of God built into the process to protect us from something that's in the process. The delay was not meant to harm them, but actually to be a help to them. So listen to me. The next time you're facing a delay in something that God has promised, we've got to ask ourselves, is this a divine delay or is this a different type of delay? But if it's a divine one, it will ultimately be for your benefit. And don't blame the delay in fulfillment on the enemy when it's God doing it. There have been different projects we have done as a church and even as the Nehemiah project that we hit delays, and looking back, that delay wasn't anything other than God protecting us and securing a better thing for us in the future. Now, here's what is interesting to me. So God says, I'm not going to drive all of the people out at one time, because if I do, the animals will destroy you. So God used their enemy against their enemy. Isn't it funny that sometimes your enemy is sometimes the enemy of your enemy? God would use the enemy of his people to protect them from the animals of the land. You know, it's amazing God is able to protect you by using your enemy against your enemy. We can see this even in the time of David and many of his encounters with Saul. And so sometimes it is amazing when you sit back and watch how God maneuvers, and his hand is even able to use your enemy against your enemy. Now, Then God says to them that as they become numerous, as they become fruitful, they would take possession. And so that got me to thinking, growth leads to possessed promises. As they matured, as they multiplied, they would take more and more possession. As they produced fruit, they would be able to take more and more possession. Many times, the unfulfilled promises in our life, let's be honest, are not because of a lack of fulfillment on God's part, but because of a lack of growth on our part, that we don't mature into those. There are promises we make to our children that they'll never get if they don't mature. And so we must become fruitful, we must mature, and as we do that, then we will take possession of the promises of God. So, remember this, delayed promises are sometimes God's delay, but the promise is still a promise, and it will be fulfilled. They were led by an angel into the promises of God. Even though I thoroughly believe in angelic ministry, we believers today are led by the Spirit of God, the Spirit of Jesus who dwells within us. And we must pay attention to Him. And we must obey His voice as He leads us into the fulfilled promises of God. And as we do that, I believe in the process we will see divine delays for our protection. That we will see Him use that which stands against us as a defense for that which stands against us. And as we commit to growth, God will little by little continue to cause us to possess that which He promised. And so I want to encourage you. He made a promise. He will keep it. It might be delayed, but it might be His delay for your benefit. And I want to tell you something. And as you mature, you will walk into and you will possess the promises of God. So sometimes we have to remember that possession is progressive. Have a great week.